Making the move to GA4. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar where we'll discuss or share some tips and tricks that we've learned along the way with all the Universal Analytics to GA4 migrations that we've done. Whether you are new to GA4 or new to analytics as a whole, or maybe you've already migrated over from Universal Analytics to GA4, or you've just heard of GA4, we believe that with what we'll share today, you'll feel comfortable to get your toes wet in GA4 and have a structure of how you approach your migration or setting up your analytics. Well, let me introduce myself since we'll be spending the next 30 minutes or so together. I'm Trevor Mazarura, Director of Analytics here at Carnegie. I've been here for a little over 2 years now and with in the web analytics space for over 9 years. I'm originally from Zimbabwe and I've lived half my life in Zimbabwe and half my life in the US. So if you do detect an accent, let's get it out of the way. That way, at least you focus on the details of what we'll share instead of wondering where my accent is from. Today's agenda. So why we'll go into why GA4, how do we get going with GA4. We'll also share what's new and exciting about GA4. Before we go into details, why GA4? Well, Google, as you may know, owns GA4 as well as Universal Analytics, and Universal Analytics just was not cutting it anymore. It was a legacy system that was built on old technology and in a space where there was just built for the web and no cookies were involved. So as you may know, the landscape has quickly evolved, and to keep up with this, what Google had been doing was patching different devices together or different data models to get a full picture of how users were interacting with websites. A lot of duct taping of bringing the systems together. Obviously, these systems, though duct taped, are not communicating with each other. They are in one place. Maybe you can extract the data and then combine that to form analysis, which, as you know, is not efficient. With that, Google said, you know what, we'll stop duct taping. We'll just move to a new platform. And with that, we'll say goodbye to Universal Analytics as it's sunsetting. But with that, we have a beautiful sunset just because we do appreciate all the work that we've done with Universal Analytics. It was a good tool, but not as good as what we need in the future. Some important dates to remember. July 2023, Universal Analytics stopped collecting data, so you will no longer receive any new data in your Universal Analytics. December 2023, if you have the premium version of Universal Analytics 360, then you stop collecting data. You get a little bit of leeway, but you have to be aware that December 2023 is when you also stop collecting data in the premium version. July 2024, you lose access to your Universal Analytics data. So we recommend having a plan if you continue to want to have access, which we recommend you should, is to extract that data and put it into a data warehouse. With the sunsetting of Universal Analytics, we're welcoming GA4, Google Analytics 4. As you can see, beautiful sunrise, new beginnings, a brighter future ahead. So this GA4 you speak of. Before we go into what GA4 is, let's take a little journey back memory lane where with the beginnings of Google Analytics. Google acquired Urchin in 2005. And then that was working well, but that was really built for or with UTMs in mind. And then in 2007, upgraded that to Google Analytics. And then some changes, some duct taping went onto Universal Analytics in 2012. And then finally, 2020, the new and shining GA4. As you are thinking through, well, some improvements, you don't want to be the person that shows up in the meeting with everything duct taped where you cannot really get insights. But GA4 is that new efficient model where you showing up with everything into one platform with a touch of a screen, you have all the information that you need. So we hope that you understand this is really an improvement and a good thing. GA4 is built with the future in mind. The landscape is evolving, and by that, we'll talk through some of the things that are causing this landscape to evolve. GA4 is built with this in mind so that it does adapt and you have the flexibility to change things here and there to match what the landscape is. With that, I think the best way for us to describe what the change in how it's adapting to the change in landscape, we'll go into some of the quick differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics. GA4 has artificial intelligence, AI, which is a topic I'm sure a lot of you are hearing right now. And one example of that is when you log into your home screen in GA4. Over time, it'll learn your preferences and how you interact with the home screen. And eventually, as it picks up what you like, it'll change and adapt to how you like to see the home screen. Universal Analytics, on the other hand, was static. Whatever you had set up, it didn't change based on your preferences. So this is another, just one quick example of how GA4 is already using machine learning. And then we'll also go into some of the details, nuances of how artificial intelligence is being used in the platform when it comes to actual reporting. There's also improved user identification for better reporting. And by that, we mean as Universal Analytics was brought up without cookies in mind, and then cookies were introduced. And then now cookies are going away. So as cookies are going away, Google anticipated that there would be that need for us to be able to better identify users. So for some users will also purposely turn off their cookies. So Google GA4 tries to identify users in different layers. And with that included, it also has some AI involved where if there's any of those indicators that it relies on, such as user ID, device ID, then it'll model the data to better understand what that user may be or better understand that user. One of the metrics that a lot of people relied on was bounce rate. This has been replaced with engagement rate. Bounce rate, you can still get it from engagement rate, but the way that it is calculated is completely different. You could do an inverse of engagement rate to replicate what bounce rate used to be, but with some nuances. Bounce rate was a metric that had some issues in that if a user came to a page and they wanted to and you wanted to see if that user actually engaged with the content, that user, if they didn't perform any action, then they'll be treated as a bounce. Even though they may have consumed the content on that page, just because they didn't perform any other actions, they're counted as a bounce. Engagement rate, on the other hand, understands that they tries to understand if a user has actually performed or engaged with your content. So if they spend more than 10 seconds, then they're not considered a bounce, or they're now considered an engaged user. So engagement rate is an improved way of understanding how users are truly engaging with your website and your content. And then improved data models for events. Universal Analytics was very static in that, or a rigid frame in that when you did events, you had to put category and then action and then value. With GA4, you have a lot more flexibility. Everything's treated as an event. Page views are treated as an event. And then with each event, you are able to add parameters. That way you get the event, and then also you get a little more granular level of what each event is. And also, there are some events that come out of the box, right out of the box when you implement GA4. So that's another area just to be aware of, is that as you're migrating, there might be some events that you might migrate to Universal Analytics, but would recommend to make sure that any of the events that you're planning to migrate are not already being collected in GA4. That way you don't have a duplication of events. One area that I'm truly excited about is the BigQuery integration. What this is it takes your GA4 data, sends it to BigQuery, low-cost data, self-managed data warehouse. In simple terms, what it is doing is taking this data at hit level and then storing it. So you can store it for as long as you want. GA4 has some limitations as far as that data storage. You can store data for up to 14 months. And then also, once you have that data extracted at hit level in a data warehouse, you can just manipulate it in different ways. We'll go into detail about that portion in a little bit. So some of the areas that we will touch upon as far as the evolving landscape that we brought up earlier is tech. As you can imagine, in the tech space, there are a lot of players that are currently there. There's a lot of players that are coming in. So with that, you need an analytics framework that takes into account all the different elements. The users will be using different devices to come to your website, different operating systems to come to your website. And then each operating system has its, or browser has its challenges and limitations. Some companies are deciding that cookies should not be used at all. Users should not be tracked. So your web analytics platform has to be able to take this into account and be flexible to adapt to this evolving landscape. The other area is law. And with law, you, as you may have heard, there's a lot of privacy issues that are being raised. So we recommend that you have assure of the data that you're collecting, and you're aware of everything that you're collecting, and you are letting users know that, hey, this is what we're collecting, and this is how we'll use this information. So this is where, whenever you're collecting any data, whether it be for your analytics, Google Analytics, or any other platform, just to ensure that you are abiding by the laws. And then you have privacy policies on your website to ensure that users know that this is what you're collecting, and then also that they have a way to opt out. And in the EU, would recommend that you let users know what information you're collecting before and get their consent before you collect it. And this is not something light to take about. So you may have heard about Sephora CCPA violation that led to a fine of 1.2 million. What Sephora had done or did is that they were using some information that they had to target users with, to advertise to users without the user's consent or them knowing. The reason we're calling it the shot around the world is we believe that this is just a warning to say, hey, we are looking at this. There's a lot of scrutiny going on as far as what companies are collecting, which information they're using, just to, again, the government saying that we are looking to protect the consumers. Users. Now users have a stronger voice. They now are fully aware of what's being tracked on different websites. So you have to be able to have a system that is flexible. For example, with the BigQuery integration, you own your data. You may get to a point where users will come to your organization or your school and say, you have this information of me, or what information do you have of me? I'll need to know. And whatever information that you tell them that you have, they also have the ability to say, I own this information, so please scrub it out of your system. That's another area where BigQuery comes into huge play, is this owning of the data. You have the data ownership. You may be asking, what happens if we do nothing? Well, we'll use an analogy of taking a road trip. Say you're on a road trip with your friends, your family, and analytics is the way that you are seeing everything and controlling everything. So you see the rear view mirror, you can see the lights of cars that are coming towards you. You can see the lights of, and then as you look forward, you have the visibility to see trucks, that truck on the other opposite side. Will it come to your side? You're probably aware that it won't, hopefully. And then Next, as you continue on that journey, your users are also asking, or they need to know, hey, what station are we on? What temperature is this? Can we adjust the temperature? How fast are we going? Are there cars ahead of us? And then we also have the GPS. Where's the GPS telling us? How much more do we have to go? If you do nothing, it's similar to driving in the dark where you don't see anything. It's fine, but you never know what you're going to run into. Are you going to crash into another car? Is there another car coming behind you? Can you avoid it? So these are insights that your passengers will need to know. So your passengers will keep asking questions. Is the heat on? Are we there yet? They'll ask again, are you there yet? How fast are we going? Do we have enough gas? Where are we turning? Because you can't see this, they can't see the signs, and you can't see the signs either, so you can't tell them. What's that noise? How fast are we going? Are we flying? Because maybe you told them that you get into the airport and jumping on a plane, but still they don't know. Is the heat on? Feeling overwhelmed, we were too. But as we stood back, we realized and took all the great things that we see that are coming along with GA4 from Universal Analytics. We now actually have more visibility and more control over over our website traffic and what we analyzing on. What we'll do is, or at least what we recommending you do is, on this stage, we'll show you how we've approached this and how you can approach and adapt it for your team. Your internal stakeholders or external stakeholders shouldn't really, your passengers on that road trip shouldn't really feel a change from Universal Analytics to GA4. It should really be seamless, a seamless transition. You should be holding your hand and letting them cross over. And how you can do that is having a framework that ensures you understand where you're coming from and then where you're going with GA4. We would recommend to follow our structured approach as you are doing this migration from Universal Analytics to GA4, or as you are starting fresh in web analytics. Would recommend 5 steps, which is 1, to do an audit, measurement plan, event and goal tracking, BigQuery integration, and then finally a Looker Studio dashboard development. It doesn't have to be Looker, but Looker is free and it plays well with Google products. That's why I would recommend Looker. The first step is the audit. The audit, your team will go under the hood to ensure that everything's configured correctly. As you know, with Universal Analytics, GA4, any analytics platform, it's not really configured for a specific industry, let alone a specific school. So you'd have to go in and understand how is it coming out of the box, and then what are the little different things that you need to tweak to ensure that you're getting clean, accurate data. Similar to your cell phone, say you buy a new cell phone, it won't have the software that you need. It probably doesn't have the phone numbers that you need, the contacts that you had in there. And let alone maybe you want to bring over some pictures or you had some duplicate pictures. This is where, again, you make sure you understand what you have already as you go into the next phases. The next phase is the measurement plan, and we're really excited about the measurement plan and hope you will be too. And when we do the measurement plan on our team, and would recommend you follow the same approach, is when you go through it, look at and try to think of what will your team be looking at in the future. What are some of the data points that the questions that you've been asked in the past and you weren't able to answer because you didn't have enough data. So it's planning ahead to make sure that you are set up correctly, really building your analytics house from the ground up instead of renovating an existing house. One area that would, some buckets that would recommend you look at and as you strategize your measurement plan is, for example, if you have a campaign or marketing initiative for brand awareness, you can see that you already have some of those metrics So if that brand awareness was supposed to increase traffic, you have some metrics already in GA4 that you'll be able to use. But at least this kind of tells you what you already have, what you need to build, and if you can build it. And then another example is if you wanted to look at website content engagement to increase user interactions or increase time spent. You have those metrics. You just have to know where to pick them. And then in some situations, you might want to create custom event tracking just so you can get more granular level data and more insight into actions that users are taking on your website. So for example, homepage call to action button clicks, admission page call to action button clicks, or apply now. Those events you'd have to set up manually or customize. If your marketing initiative was to increase lead for lead generation, then you'd have to configure how you're going to do that. Is lead generation, or what are you considering lead generation? Is it visit registrations, requests for info form submissions? And then finally, if your campaign is to increase conversions, as in increase applications, then you want to make sure that your conversions are set up for application submissions, undergraduate, graduate, if you have those, and then also looking at macro conversions. So as you see, would recommend to structure it so that you have macro conversions and then micro conversions, with the macros being the overarching goals, and then the micro being the little goals that lead up to that overarching goal. So for example, thinking of it as a Super Bowl analogy, where in the Super Bowl you have the preseason, you have all these different tactics that you're doing, and then as the season goes on, you're making sure that you win all those games, the games enough to get to the next stage. So building those micro conversions so that you can lead up to that macro conversion of the Super Bowl. So as you think through it, that's the analogy that we recommend, that you frame your thought process in that, what are the macros, what do we want to achieve at the end of the day, and then what are the little things that we need to do to make sure that we achieve that macro goal. Segmenting, would recommend to always segment. That way you understand what different users your website may be catering to, prospective students, their parents, donors, existing students, internal staff. Segmenting ensures that you have a clean picture of the different segments that you're interested in. So we recommend to also make sure that in your measurement plan you include segmenting. We know that the measurement plan can be a little daunting, but we recommend to do it, because once you start doing it, you'll see it's not as complicated as it may look, and it will provide insight. You'll see where you may be missing some tracking on some key pages, or some pages you're not able to track. And then on the next stage, we're looking at event and goal implementation. So this will be driven off what you would have found in the measurement plan development. That will feed into this event and goal. All the events that you'd have identified in the measurement plan, they'll be built into here. And then also all the conversions being application submissions, RFI submissions, those would recommend to implement them in here. It's going to be a team effort, because you'll need different areas of your school to come together to build this. For example, you may need to track application submissions, and that's in a different area. Maybe you're on the website and applications are controlled by the admissions. Then you need to work together to see if you can implement your GA4 tracking so that you can track those complete application submissions. Maybe your application is on a portal is on a third party. You will need to work with that third party to see if they can implement your GA4 so that you are able to track those application submissions. In some cases, you might not be able to track application submissions, and then in that measurement plan, you'd have already known that you won't be able to track this because certain roadblocks. In that area, that's where we would recommend to identify a proxy that you can use as an application submission. So maybe you use apply button clicks and use that as a conversion to track conversions as a proxy for application submissions. And one thing too to think about these goals and these goals conversions that we're talking about is that as you're using the attribution modeling system in GA4, it will require you to have identified some conversions. And finally, almost close to mine, I get excited about the BigQuery integration. And again, this is really exciting in that with prior to GA4, you had to have a premium version of Google Analytics, which is Google 360, with a $150,000 tag for you to be able to use this connector, unless if you're using a third party. But with GA4, this is a native connector. You can take your GA4 data and send it to BigQuery, really low cost. And we do have a model that if you needed to understand, we can share that model with you where you can predict what your cost will be. What this does, as I mentioned earlier, is really opens up the door. Sky's the limit of the analysis that you can do. You have this hit level data, and now you can manipulate it in different ways, get insights that you cannot get when you're just using the GA4 platform itself. One opportunity that we see is with GA4, it has a pseudo ID, and this is used to identify different users. So each user, if they come back, as long as they don't clear their cookies, they have the same pseudo ID. So when they come to the website, you have that data going into BigQuery, and then you can manipulate it. Say you wanted to see a user with a pseudo ID that came in 6 months ago to your website. What do they act? What do they do? What are the actions that they taken? Also, if you have pseudo IDs of internal team members, is there a way that you can see if the IP address filtering or identification is working? For example, if you do see some pseudo IDs that are some pseudo IDs on campus that should be getting filtered, they shouldn't be there because they should be getting filtered or identified as internal traffic in your GA4. So just a wealth of opportunities of what you can do with that data. Finally, look at Studio Dashboard. We recommend to, whether it's going to be using Looker Studio or a BI tool, we recommend for you to build this. That way you don't have all your users going to your GA4 account to manipulate. So that controls how many people you grant access to it. Because if you don't have a dashboard, and when someone needs insights, either they're coming to you or they're going to your GA4 and trying to create their own truth. And you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, so to say, because they can go in and start to manipulate things that you've set up and kind of mess up your thing. So we recommend having a Data Studio dashboard. Internal stakeholders, they might not be savvy with GA4 or any analytics platform. So using the dashboard, anyone understands it. When someone doesn't need to be a mechanic to drive a car, they see the dashboard, they can control the gears here. But if the oil light comes on, then they need to call you so you can go in and dig into the platform and understand what the issue may be. Or maybe there's opportunities. Again, this is just really to get a quick glance of what is happening on your website, pulse check, and then have those have that guide so that you can start to dig in. So hopefully you're feeling good about GA4. Keep calm and keep measuring. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. We'll be happy to answer any questions. So again, keep calm and keep measuring. Thank you.